I am just so delighted to be here. I've been looking forward to this for so long, in part because I care so deeply about the same things that all of you care about. And that's a lot of what I wanted to talk about today. You guys get to make a difference in people's lives all over this country, and it's just one of the most gratifying things I think that any of us could possibly do. So thank you so much for having me. I will start off by saying I get a little nervous actually talking in front of crowds. Getting to talk to real live people isn't something I get to do very often. This is a pretty big audience, bigger audience than sometimes we get every night on CNN. So there is a very special place in my heart for the YMCA, in part because I used to go there myself when I was a kid. And when I came to CNN and started working as a reporter, one of my goals was to do some sort of formal partnership, do things with the YMCA that I thought could make a difference to people all over the country. And one of the things we did, we were very proud of this partnership that we created early on that was started by Tara Taylor from the YMCA in Cleveland, who I believe is here. It's called We Run This City. And it was just amazing. It's Cleveland? Is that over here? All right. It was a program where kids ran the distance of a marathon over the course of several months, and then eventually were able to finish the final mile during the official marathon. It was this amazing thing. Through the partnership, we were able to create partnerships with 5 more cities and really start to expand the program. We were very proud of a program like that. We were proud of what Tara and Mamie Moore were able to do, and Jessica Wiley, who I believe are all here. And we are here today in part because of programs like that we were able to make happen. I love talking about this in part as a physician because I think it's an obligation of ours to educate people at the public health level. It's something that I've chosen to do through journalism, but I think it's something that we can all do in our own ways. And I will tell you, after doing this for more than 10 years, you learn a lot. And part of what I wanted to do tonight was arm you with some of the knowledge that we've been able to accrue over the last more than 10 years. One of the things that's particularly challenging when talking about obesity, when talking about unhealthy behaviors, what we're fundamentally trying to do is say, look, we want you to do all these things. We want you to eat right, we want you to exercise, we want you to live a healthier life, and if you do those things, nothing will happen. It's a tough argument to make. It's a tough argument to make as physicians, it's a tough argument to make as reporters as well, but we do it because we think it's so important. We do it because we want a more healthy America. We do it for our loved ones, our husbands, our wives, and most of all, I think, our children. For me, it was our children, for sure. When I had my children, it was sort of a reset button for me. Those are my 3 daughters. They're aged 8, 6, and 4. Their names are Sage, Sky, and Soleil. I call them Earth, Wind, and Fire. But it is one of the greatest joys, I think, in the world to be a dad. And I think it is also a brush with your own mortality, because you want to be around for all the important things in their lives. And I remember just not too long ago, I was driving around with my middle daughter, whose name is Sky. That's Sky. And I was thinking about some of these things. We were driving around, it was a nice day, and I was wondering about all the formative experiences that would shape her. What kind of person would she turn out to be? And she was sitting in the back seat. She was in her car seat, and we're driving along, and I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror all of a sudden. It was just one of those moments as a parent. You suddenly think, wow, I'm a parent. I got a kid in the back seat. And as I was looking at her, my stethoscope was sitting next to her, and she picked it up, and she started to play with it. And I immediately thought, wow, this is that moment when she decides she wants to be a doctor. I was going to tell people about this for years to come. She started picking the stethoscope, and she's got the little things in her ears, and she starts to play with it. And eventually she brings the other piece closer and closer to her mouth, and finally she says, "Welcome to McDonald's, can I take your order?" Well, wasn't quite the thing I expected her to say, and I want her to follow her dreams, certainly. But I might choose a place that has a bit of a healthier menu. And that is a bit of a good segue into a lot of what we've been talking about on CNN with regard to health for so many years now. You know, we in this country at one time were one of the fittest nations on the planet. We were the country that other countries would look at and say, we want to be more like them. We'd like to be like them. And we went from that to now being one of the most overweight nations on the planet. The bad news is that it happened. The good news is I think that this is fixable, in large part because of the efforts of the people in this room. And this gets me very, very excited. I mean, certainly we talk about the fast food industry, we talk about the beverage industry, and they get a lot of the blame for the current state of affairs. I think no question. You've all heard the statistics over and over again. 66% of American adults either overweight or obese, a third of our children in the same boat. Fast food is certainly a contributor to the problem, but how exactly? What do we know about this? How big a problem is this? We decided to sort of drill down on this a couple of years ago for a series of stories that we were doing, looking at the cost of fast food calories versus the cost of healthy food calories. And I think that this kind of makes the case a little bit, kind of blew me away. At a fast food restaurant, for example, 20-count box of chicken nuggets, 3 large fries, 2 large sodas, enough to feed a family of 5. It's a bargain. Costs about $16. You want to balance that with a well-balanced meal. That's 5 chicken breasts, 5 baked potatoes, 3 heads of broccoli. You're going to get fewer calories, 2,380 calories, and it costs you 24 bucks. If you do the math even a little bit more, what you find is it costs you about a penny per calorie for the healthy stuff and about a half a cent for the unhealthy stuff. So which one are people going to choose? You got to go cook those chicken breasts too, and cook that broccoli and bake those potatoes. It is hard to do. We're asking people to do a lot. And now with obesity rates about 145% higher in lower income areas versus middle and high income areas, you get to see how the pieces of this puzzle, they start to take place. Now, even if price weren't a factor, just take that out of the equation for a second. If you were living in one of these low income areas, could you even find 2 pounds of chicken breast? Could you find that broccoli? Could you find those potatoes? And again, I know this is something that a lot of you talk about in your own communities quite a bit, but it is amazing to me that 23 million Americans in low-income areas don't have a grocery store within a mile of their home. And if they don't have a car, they're not going to the grocery store. It's just one of these remarkable facts. And as much as we talk about problems that are so difficult to fix all over the world, things that we report on every night, this is something that's within our reach. I want to talk about food policy for a second. We talk about the neighborhoods here. Let's talk about the nation for a second. You know, when we talk about food policy, we have these agricultural subsidies, foods that we think are important for people to eat. We think that they're important, and we invest money in certain foods. $84 billion of it goes to growing one particular thing. That's corn. $84 billion. Last year we produced 10 billion bushels of corn. Half of it was used to feed livestock. That makes our meat fattier and less nutritious. Less than half of it was used to make ethanol, and the rest ended up in our food directly, much of it in the form of high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup has gone down in price by 24% since 1985. It's one of the only food products to actually do that. $84 billion for corn. Now, just to give you a little bit more context, 0.3% of that number went into specialty crops such as apples. 0.3%. Just to blow you away even more, 5 times that went into tobacco. 5 times tobacco over apples. It's a really remarkable thing. And this idea, ultimately, that even if you could find the food in some way, the cost and how many different motivating factors are in that cost is something that we all have to contend with every single day. If you do have access, what that food policy does, it leads to certain problems that we all have to deal with. If you do have access to those healthy foods, many of them are coming from one town in America, which is Yuma, Arizona. Food is grown there, it's brought in on trucks and trains, and it goes to your particular plate after having traveled, on average, about 1,500 miles. They're stored in freezer for months and then defrosted and then labeled as fresh produce. Some of it's still very good, but you do have a degradation in just how nutritious this food is. So even if you're trying to do the right thing, you can afford it, you actually have access to it, you're trying to do the right thing, what you end up getting is maybe not nearly as good as you hoped it would be. So that is fast food, no food, and frozen food. Now I want to talk about something else here. Personal responsibility. That's a big one. What is the personal responsibility? On average, in a single day, we make about 200 decisions regarding our food. 200 decisions regarding our food. And it's much easier to find something that's quick, tasty, and not necessarily good for you than to do the opposite. I do the same thing. I mean, I make these decisions every single day. I go to airports, and it's funny because now that I do this medical reporting on television, people watch what I eat. And I cheat every now and then. I was at the airport, I was really hungry. I thought I was gonna get a healthy piece of pizza. And I literally was folding this thing up and eating it in the corner so nobody would see me. Felt like I was doing crack. And one woman comes up to me, she says, "I see you, Dr. Gupta, eating that pizza. You can't get away with it." The one person who doesn't let me get away with it at all is my wife. She's constantly making these decisions for me. It's amazing. And every time we talk about decisions, it's one of the biggest discussions that we have regarding what the food that we cook in our homes, the decisions that we make when we go out. My wife makes a lot of these decisions in our household. She makes a lot of decisions for me, period, to be quite honest. She told me this funny story the other day. It was kind of funny. I'll share it with you. She said that there was this, she said, "I want to tell you a joke about neurosurgeons." That's how she started it, because I'm a neurosurgeon. I said, "All right, honey, this should be good." And I said, "I don't think there are any jokes about neurosurgeons," just goading her on. And she says, "Yeah, there's this guy in the hospital, he's really sick, and the doctors come out and they tell the family, 'Look, you know, your loved one, he's really ill. I mean, the only thing that's really going to help him is to do a brain transplant.'" Family's understandably confused. They say, "Brain transplant? We didn't know that they're doing those." Doctor says, "Yeah, we started doing those a few years ago. The bad news is that they're really expensive and insurance doesn't cover it." They say, "Well, how much is it, doctor?" They say, "Well, it's $500,000 for a male brain and $250,000 for a female brain." And all the men in the family nodded as if this was the most obvious thing they'd ever heard. And finally, one young woman spoke up and she said, "Well, hang on a second, doctor, how come it's so much cheaper for a female brain?" And without missing a beat, the doctor says, "Well, that's easy. They're cheaper, they've been discounted because they've been previously used." So, you know, yeah, you thought that was going the other way. My wife says she's going to make a joke about neurosurgeons, and instead she makes a joke about all men. And we talk about these 200 decisions that we make every day. Part of this is banking on the idea that we even know what the right decisions are. 36% of the country basically qualifies as being health illiterate, according to a recent study from the Agency for Healthcare Quality and Research. 36% of the country. So even if they have these decisions, they don't know what the right things are to do. They don't know necessarily that hypertension means high blood pressure. They don't know what diabetes is. Don't step on it, it'll make you cry. It's all part of personal responsibility. And that brings us sort of the last piece of the puzzle, education. You know, I spend a lot of time sort of touring these so-called food deserts all over the country. Places that you may be trying to address as well in your own communities. And I talk to people. I spend a lot of time talking to people as part of the stories that we do. I met a 21-year-old guy, and I was having this conversation with him, and I realized partway through the conversation that he had no idea what asparagus was. We've been talking about asparagus. He had no idea what it was, what it tasted like, if you cooked it, if it was good for you. It was amazing. He thought that if he simply didn't eat fast food every night, that was healthy. He didn't know that 2 tablespoons of ketchup has more sugar than a soda. He didn't know that olive oil, which yes, has the good oils, but still has 100 calories per tablespoon. These are the problems that we're forced to deal with. Most people don't realize that we're drinking so many of our calories. More than 10% of our calories every given day are from the drinks. We think those are easy calories. We don't have to worry about them. A lot of people don't realize that, yes, maybe a little bit of chocolate is good for you. Whenever I do a story and I say chocolate, a little bit of chocolate is good for you, I get all these great emails from people. "Thank you, doctor." Too much chocolate adds too many inches and too many pounds. People don't always know that. So the question becomes, how do you address a problem that has so many contributing factors like this? And that is part of the reason I am so delighted to be here today, because of the YMCA. You get a group of people together that has as many contributing parties as the YMCA. They have as many programs as the YMCA, and they're all under this cohesive umbrella that's embodied by the people in this room today. That's why I'm so impressed by what the YMCA has accomplished. It's why we do what we do, and part of the reason that you do what you do. I understand that there's more than 900 YMCA branches represented here today. That's a remarkable thing. I can't think of another organization in America that does that. 80% of America lives within 5 miles of a YMCA. Think about the impact that could potentially have. I've been racking my brain in preparation for this speech, and I can't think of another organization that may be better equipped to handle some of these problems that I've just outlined, except for maybe the fast food restaurants. So you've got the framework, you've got the know-how, you've got the number of people with this desire to help. So then you start to drill in on the specific pieces of the puzzle. And that's what it's really about for us. I think we talk about the problems far too much, to the point where people's eyes start to literally glaze over. But once you start to talk about solutions and things that have really worked, and again, not only led to more functional lives, but maybe even saved people's lives, then all of a sudden it becomes very, very exciting. Let me just start right here in Philadelphia, and the idea of food availability, something that we've reported on a lot. Like many American cities, Philadelphia had a high rate of obesity. 35% of adults were obese in 2010. And the front line of obesity, if you start to look around, in many ways, especially for children, is the bodega, the corner store. Kids will get about 800 calories a day from the bodega or the corner store. That's more than a pound a week from that corner store. And what are they selling in these corner stores? They're selling the sodas, they're selling the chips, the candy bars, the cakes, they're selling the junk food. So in 2010, this organization called the Food Trust decided to try and change that. They realized that high sugar and junk food consumption was a big part of the reason the city was having so many troubles. So they decided to actually go to the bodegas themselves, go to the store owners, and propose something that at the time was considered somewhat radical. Take a look.
Philadelphia is known for food. After all, it's home of the cheesesteak. So it's not surprising that it's been among the most overweight cities in the country. And changing that, especially in a city where poverty and violence are also high, well, that's easier said than done.
So it's really easy as doctors to sit with patients and say that you need to eat more healthfully, you need to be physically active, but people live in environments where unhealthy stuff is readily available. It's